Okay. Welcome to the Darjana International School Debate Finals. Let's start by introducing our judges at this time, Mr. Marwan Sis, Hamza Saleh, and Mr. Joseph. Now, our contestants will be representing the proposition team, 10 purple, and the opposition team, 10 orange. They will be debating on whether their parents should be blamed for teens' actions. Now, since we are at the finals, you all know the rules by now, so no need to go over them. But the other stress points that I have to mention include that none of the contestants should put down any other contestant. No put downs. If it's not your turn, you must raise your hand to speak. And the team will lose a point if a player or contestant interrupts the other, or a contestant whispers while someone is talking. Having said that, let's start by the opening statement from 10 Purple.
Good morning, everyone. So we stand here today in honor of Darjana International School's final debate session for the 10th grade. Before beginning, we would again like to thank the English department for holding such a rewarding, empowering activity for all of us. We would also like to thank the opposing team for their courage and bravery to publicly defend their opinion in front of everyone. I would just like to mention before beginning that for the limited time of the debate, only 3 of us will be making claims, and the 4th will be taking down notes. Today, my team and I have decided that parents do in fact affect their teenagers' actions, and thus can be blamed for their teenage misbehavior. We have chosen to take this decision not for our personal wishes, but because when we eliminate biased, unfair opinions, and when we think according to realistic standards, there is an apparent strong correlation between parenting and teenage behavior. However, before proceeding with this debate, we must first properly understand what is parenting. Well, it is the process of taking care of children until they are old enough to take care of themselves. It is turning a tiny, squalling, demanding stranger into a wise, productive, and capable adult. You see, parents are the leaders of their children. Without proper parenting, children may turn out discourteous and insolent, but it's up to the parent to correct that behavior. However, before we proceed with this debate session, it must be made crystal clear to everyone in the audience, the judges, and our opposing team, that parental influence is not the only influence in the world. However, today's discussion is not if parental influence is or is not the only influence in the world. Today's topic is, can parents be blamed for teenage misbehavior? And the answer to that question is yes. First of all, teenagers are influenced by their parents' parenting style. Such influence shapes teenagers' personalities, and such influence can cause teenagers to take undesirable deeds. If the parenting of a parent is substandard, poor, and inadequate, chances are a teenager will execute unmannerly, uncivil deeds. Second of all, teenagers view their parents as role models. Now, what is a role model? A role model is a person looked up to by others as an example to be imitated. Thus, if a teenager views his parents as role models and imitates them, who is there to blame for unacceptable behavior? Third of all, parents brought their children into this world. When parents participate in the act that produces children, they must accept the responsibility to take care for any child that was conceived. If the parents couldn't manage a child's behavior over a numerous number of years, 15 for us, it's pretty clear we can blame the parents for the misbehavior going on. They are simply not ready to raise a child properly. Thank you.
Okay, turn orange.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to greet my jury and my opponent, and I would like to thank for everyone who helped me to reach this point in the debate finals. A decade and a half ago, I was initiated in a long transformation. If you use the time-lapse camera, you would see a one-celled zygote transform in 9 short months into a baby who was 20 inches long, weighing in at 8 pounds. 15 years later, I would transform again into a young man of 184 centimeters and 200 pounds. Pretty remarkable. The central transformation leading up to adolescence takes place in the realm of consciousness. At 6 weeks old, consciousness appeared, as my original play begins in the form of representational images. It was composed of my authentic being and its adaptation to responsiveness. From that point on, the rest of my life has been lived, no longer by automatic pilot, but a living play in the theater of my brain. Let's use our time-lapse camera again to witness the emotional relationship between my mother and me in the realm of emotional relatedness. My transformations took me from the total enclosure in the womb to my mother's cradling arms, and then from her holding arms to of by myself. I rolled over, I sat, I crawled, and I walked away, following my curiosity. I was carried in her holding gaze. I went off again out of sight. By age 4, I'd internalized the cultural world around me and incorporated its magical stories. Then, in my childhood from 5 to 12, I did not have the creation of new plays. They'd already been formed. They had become extended, modified, and deepened in my brain. During childhood, my parents and my village drew an unbroken boundary around me. That is where it was safe to learn and master basic skills of education. It was just a body of cultural beliefs and a set of cultural values. My childhood experience in the context of my unique character theater further developed my plays, writing them into living memory. In addition, I was subjected to the same loving home environment that has been so influential in creating those plays that I began with. During the teenage years, everything changed. And this is the 8-year process by which I made an inner play my own play. I did this by testing my childhood play in reality. This is the adolescent's task. I undertook the wherewithal for provision and protection by myself. During adolescence, I tested the limits of reality and myself. I emerged from the intact circle of my parents' tribe and culture. My job as a teenager was to throw off the imposed rules of childhood, no longer saying yes to anything I said no. I steered my way through experience to find out and fulfill who I am. I may have chosen new values or may have authentically returned to the values of my parents. I did a walkabout to test myself my own way. While on the way, as my nature imposes, I collided with a smorgasbord of life's temptations. I committed some mistakes. You're such an erased child. Your parents didn't raise you well, and even shame lies on your parents. I would hear when confronted by mistakes. Do they really deserve those accusations? No, I am not an erased child, and my parents raised me really well. Why? Because flashback, they taught me good manners. In flashback, they sacrificed and devoted everything they can. And flashback, they exerted more than they could in taking care of me. Do they really deserve that? Our parents are not responsible for most, if any, of our actions because we are the ones who were lured by life's baits. They shouldn't be blamed because we should learn how to be responsible by blaming none other than ourselves. And because we are most of the times the victims of peer pressure and other inevitable environmental effects, and simply because we are the victim of this generation. Thank you.
Okay, now Tim Purple, you can present your main arguments.
We would like to begin with our first argument. Teenagers are influenced by their parents' parenting style. You see, the behavior of teenagers is highly influenced by the style parents use while parenting. According to the Center for Parenting Organization, there are 3 main parenting styles that are most commonly used. The 3 types of parenting styles are permissive, aggressive, and assertive. Let us take a look at these types and better understand their consequences and effects. First of all, we have the permissive style. It relies most heavily on the nurture role without offering enough structure. When you primarily use the permissive style of parenting, your child does not learn to respect you. Proper limits are not set, and he has too much power in the house. As a result, your child will not build healthy self-esteem. You do not show yourself to be in charge, and as a result, your child will be less likely to turn for you for guidance in situations in his life. He will take an independent path and ignore you. Second of all, we have the aggressive style of parenting. Many parents believe this is the best type of parenting, however, it isn't. It relies most heavily on the structure role without offering enough nurture. A parent using this style refuses to listen to the child's point of view and is typically harsh, angry, and cold. Children from these families often become very rebellious or submissive. New research from the University of New Hampshire, claims aggressive parents are more likely to raise disrespectful children who do not see them as legitimate authority figures. Finally, we have the assertive parenting style, the best parenting style, yet sadly the least used. Parents using this approach are willing to listen and yet still hold firm so that the parents and the child's needs are both basically met. This style is most successful because it uses a healthy balance of both nurture and structure. When you use the assertive style of parenting, your child is more likely to come to you for direction in his future life when issues arrive. However, if the parent is negligent or aggressive, the child is most likely to ignore the parent and not follow what he says. Assertive parents tend to have teenagers who are less likely to be influenced by peer pressure. These teenagers are also more likely to be influenced in positive ways, such as doing well in school. And this is studied by the research in New Hampshire. However, the problem with many parents is that they tend to believe they're doing a great job while parenting, while they are either too permissive, aggressive, or negligent. In such cases, we can only blame the parents for teenage misbehavior because they have used the wrong methods of parenting.
Our second point is teenagers see their parents as role models, and a role model is a person you imitate in actions and behavior. Thus, we cannot blame teenagers for imitating their parents' behavior. Parents have a very important role to play in a teenager's life, even if it doesn't feel that way. You see, research shows that children often grow up to mimic their parents' behavior, attitudes, and beliefs. For example, research indicated that parental behavior about smoking is the key factor in delaying the onset of daily smoking, according to Carl Hill, who is the director of the University of Washington's Seattle Social Development Project and is also an associate research professor in social work. 12-year-olds whose parents smoked were more than 2 times as likely to begin smoking on a daily basis between the ages of 13 and 21 than were children whose parents didn't use tobacco. If one parent was a heavy drinker, then the child's chances of becoming a heavy drinker increases by 2 or 3 times. In a 2005 study done in Wales, children of heavy drinkers were found to drink more frequently, more heavily, and more so often alone than children whose parents didn't have alcohol problems. Children raised in homes that experience domestic violence are likely to either abuse their spouses or be abused by them. According to UNICEF organization, the single best predictor of children becoming either perpetrators or victims of domestic violence later in life is whether or not they grow up in a home where there is domestic violence. Studies from various countries support these findings that rates of abuse are higher among women whose husbands were abused as children or saw their mothers being abused. Children who grow up with violence at home learn early and powerful lessons about violence in interpersonal relationships to dominate others, and is even encouraged in doing so. Thank you.
Third of all, parents brought their children into this world. When parents participate in the act that produces children, they accept the responsibility to care for any child that is conceived, meaning children did not ask to come here, parents brought them here. Thus, it's the parents' job to take care of them. Now, you may say that a child was an accident, you did not intend to conceive, but the fact is that when you, and by you I mean the parents, participate in the act that may result in a child, then it is your responsibility to care for the child that results. Now, for example, the government did not bring your child into this world, you did. So don't expect the government to care for your child. And you have no right whatsoever to blame other people for your teenager's misbehavior. Parents must accept the goal of raising a child properly and must diligently work toward this goal. They cannot leave this to others. I want all of you to think logically for a moment. According to the World Health Organization, teenagers range from 10 to 19 years old. So, if a parent is giving 19 years to raise a child and has failed, isn't it fair to blame the parent? We had an interview with Dr. Christie, who as a younger person worked in both the Boys Club in Canada and the YMCA. Above that, he also had a children's camp of his own, which was targeted at young adolescents aged 13 to 17. And he is a licensed psychologist in both education and clinical in Michigan. Take a listen at what he had to say. We asked him, should parents be held responsible for their teenagers' actions? And he said, ethically, morally, and by law, they are responsible. He also said that they brought their child into this world. Some, however, show less attention than others. For 15 to 16, which is our age, they have been parenting a person. We must blame them for what is going on. They cannot be blameless. There may be external factors, however, parents are still responsible for their teenagers' actions. Thank you.
Okay, 10 orange.
Okay, now before we start any discussion, let's first look at the sole truth behind being a teenager. It's not easy being a teenager as you may think. The teenager years can play out like a choose-your-own-adventure novel. You choose your own choices, where everyday temptations lead to tough decisions. What if I took that big jump on my bike? What's the worst thing that could happen if I snuck after curfew? Should I try smoking? Teenagers must act on an endless parade of choices. Some choices include smoking, come with serious consequences, and as a result, adolescents often find themselves trapped between their impulsive tendencies, just try it, and their newfound ability to make well-informed and logical choices. Wait, maybe that's not such a good idea. So what makes a teenager brain so complex? What drives adolescents, more than any other age group, to sometimes make rash or questionable decisions? By peering into the brains of teenagers, scientists who study brain development have finally begun finding answers. Our brains take a lot longer to fully form than was previously thought. In teens, the frontal lobe, where our decision-making happens, is not as connected to the rest of the brain as it is later in life. This means teens literally cannot come to decision as fast as an adult. Teens take an average of 170 milliseconds longer to go over the consequences of a decision, which in turn makes them more likely to decide the risk if it's worth it or not. Teens should learn to be responsible. I wouldn't be in trouble at school if my mom had just written me an excuse, complained a teen I was counseling recently, says Professor Tony Black, Department of Adolescence Anthropology, State University of Nebraska. And the teacher didn't have to fail me. He could have let me off with a warning. As I listened to this bright 15-year-old explain why everyone was at fault for this situation except himself, I encouraged him to take personal responsibility for his own choices. He looked at me as if I was speaking a foreign language or simply had lost my mind. Rather than being the exception, I think that the example has become the rule. No one, from politicians to celebrities, to our own kids, seems able to admit they were wrong or take responsibility these days. Everyone seems to be playing the blame the game. Kids often blame the teachers for their academic performance, their siblings for their misdeeds, and if there are no siblings, there's always the dog. And why not? Blaming others is modeled for our children on a daily basis by adults, their peers in the news across the world. It's so easy to focus on others when something goes wrong that we often don't even realize we're doing. This has become so widespread that we really notice it when someone actually does take responsibility. In our society, blame is so commonplace that we're often surprised when someone actually owns up to something with no excuses. Hey mom, can you hang on to my responsibility for a minute? Every teen, after all, when was the last time you said, yes officer, I was speeding and I deserve that ticket? It's the same for our kids. They don't like to feel discomfort any more than adults do. But that's how we learn and grow, by recognizing and acknowledging our mistakes and then doing things differently in the future, so we don't feel uncomfortable that way again. Why does everyone blame the parents? Well, in society today, there's been a growing trend of blaming parents for a child's behavior. Whenever there's a tragedy or a child behaves in a way that's dangerous, harmful, or irresponsible or wrong, people always say, where are the parents? Parents, particularly those whose kids are struggling with poor behavior choices, have taken this to heart, internalizing and often blaming themselves. If I hadn't had to work as much, maybe my son wouldn't be so angry. Maybe he wouldn't get into fights like he does. He tells me all the time it's my fault, and maybe he's right. The child gets the message that he's not responsible for his own behavior choices. His parents are, unfortunately, this can lead to a lifetime pattern of blaming others and refusing to take responsibility. Now, let's go on to peer pressure. We can't blame parents for their teens' actions because teens themselves can't control their own actions. Teenagers are capable of taking decisions but are easily affected by other factors and outside factors. Peers, for instance. Say you're sitting around with some friends playing video games, and someone mentions a particular game that happens to be one of your favorites. Oh, that game is easy, so not worth the time. One of your friends says dismissively. The others agree inwardly. You know that it's a game you often happen to enjoy quite a lot, but outwardly, not wanting to debate the issue, you go along with the crowd. Now, you have just experienced what is commonly referred to as peer pressure. It is probably more accurate to refer to this as peer influence or social influence to adopt a particular type of behavior, dress, or attitude in order to be accepted as part of a group. As a teen, it's likely you've experienced the effect of peer influence in a number of different areas, ranging from clothes you wear to music you listen. For teens, school and other activities take you away from home. You may spend more time with your friends than you do with your parents and siblings. As you become more independent, your peers naturally play a greater role in your life. Sometimes, though, particularly in emotional situations, peer influence can be hard to resist. It really has become pressure, and you may feel compelled to do something you're uncomfortable with. What science research tells us about peer influence? There are two main features that seem to distinguish teenagers from adults in their making decisions, says Lawrence Steinberg, a researcher at Temple University in Philadelphia. During early adolescence, in particular, teenagers are drawn to immediate rewards of potential choice and are less initiative and attentive to the possible risks. Second, teenagers in general are listening to control their impulses, to think ahead, and to resist pressure from others. These skills develop gradually as a teen's ability to control his or her behavior gets better throughout adolescence. According to Dr. B.J. Casey from the Weill Medical College of Cornell University, teens are very quick and accurate in making judgments and decisions on their own in situations where they have time to think. Now, let's go on with the media and the genie within. One thing that parents can't totally control over their teenagers from using its media. Talking in consideration the shallow knowledge most parents know about the uses of the media, teens have the freedom to do whatever they want when using the internet, for instance. The media's, and I quote, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and make the guilty innocent. That's power, because they control the minds of the masses, according to the think exist. The mass media has become a part of daily life for many people. Contents in the media introduced to younger people make it difficult for them to distinguish between what is real and what's not. As a result, stimulating confusion and blind initiation, the mass media plays an important role in the increase of violence, sexual activity, and risky behaviors among teenagers. The first effect of mass media on teenagers is violence. Thank you.
يلا طيب كمل تحكي شيء
We're going to talk about parenting now versus then. 21st century, parenting has changed. These changes are visible in certain disciplinary measures. Obedience has become less important, while parents have started concentrating more on close relationships with their kids. Parenting has become less about fear-based relationships and with their kids. Parenting and discipline. They become less, but this is as far as parents should take the responsibility for bad behavior. At the same time, parents have grown far from sensitive risks that their children face, both physical and psychological. Anxiety has become the hallmark of contemporary parenting. Stoking parental fears are sensationalistic media accounts of the risks posed by pedophiles and the prevalence of stranger abduction of children. as well as reports about the potential perils posed by bullying, vaccines, additives, and various environmental hazards. Equally important is a profound reversal in parental expectations. At the same time,
Yeah, we're sorry for all that. Now let's talk about parenting now versus 10. Stalking parental fears are sensationalistic media accounts of the risk posed by pedophiles and the prevalence of stranger abduction of children, as well as reports about potential perils posed by bullying, vaccines, additives, and various environmental hazards. As mothers and fathers devote more time to work, a sense of guilt also colors parent-child relations. Even though recent research indicates that parents actually spend more time face-to-face with their teenagers more than did their 1950s counterparts. Mother and fathers worry more about providing kind of safe and secure childhood they themselves enjoyed, involving a great deal of free unstructured play with neighborhood friends. Now, if words didn't really convince you, let's talk with numbers. According to a survey we held on teenagers of Darjana International School on random 103 students from grades 8 to 12, a remarkable 89.1% would claim complete responsibility of all their actions, whether good or bad, and wouldn't blame their parents for anything. A staggering 79.7% of all the teenagers asked believed that the teenagers of previous generations were much more responsible than they are now.
Excuse me.
And
Your time is up. Sorry.
a minute.
Okay. Now we'll start with the cross-examination. 10 purple.
First of all,
ماشي قلت لهم. Stick to the time limit, please. Stick to the time limit. What are the teams? 7 minutes each.
First of all, in your introduction, you claimed you are not an ill-raised child. But who said you were? No flattery intended, but if you were an ill-raised child, would you think you would be here debating with us? Plus, I would like to ask you, who made you the respectful person you are today? Aren't these people your parents? Second of all, you were talking about the subconscious mind and the choice you have to make between your subconscious mind and your conscious mind. I would like to ask you, what shapes the subconscious mind you speak of? Isn't what shapes the subconscious mind the lessons that have been taught by your parents? So how can you claim that parents are blameless for teenagers' actions if they are the foundation of a teenager's subconscious mind? And with all due respect to the statistics you found, we have also conducted a survey on the students in the same medium you speak of, and the results you're talking about were in complete opposition to what we found. 77.4% of our respondents were female, and only 22.6% were male. 90.3% see their parents as role models in life. Thus, it is completely justified that parents do copy their parents' actions. Teenagers copy their parents' actions. Third of all, 84% find that the effect of parents on teenage behavior is very strong. And finally, 84% believe that if a teenager is disrespectful and not well behaved, it's the parents' fault they were unable to raise him well. Also, you've been talking all about the blame game. However, we never mentioned that you should blame a teenager right in front of his face. However, what if you do? How does that refute the fact that it's not the parents' fault? It is the parents' fault because they have not raised their children correctly. According to Richard Templer, the author of this best-selling book in front of you, The Reals of Parenting, he says that the most common cause of the teenage misbehavior is a lack of parenting. Now, there are outside influences, but these influences you speak of, they are not related to the topic we speak about. You've been talking about the media. Is the question, is the media responsible for a teenager's mistake? And you've been talking about peer pressure. Is the question, are peers responsible for the teenager's mistakes? The answer is no. Our topic is strictly about parenting and their effect on teenagers. Plus, you've been talking about peer pressure. However, if a parent truly raises his child properly, the chances of a teenager being affected by peer pressure are way less. Also, we would finally like to ask you a question. Nationally, there are approximately 1.7 million children that live in homes with loaded and unlocked firearms and weapons. So how can we talk about school violence and other types of misbehavior and violence without any recognition of where this violence has been conceived and nurtured? Shouldn't parents who fail to secure a firearm at home hold responsibility for the actions of a child who uses the weapon? Also, we would like to ask you, why does a teenager kill and rob? How can a teenager get to this point to be doing something so horrible? These things are not just circumstantial, but thought out by a teenager. A teenager in a loving family with moral values and proper parenting will more than likely not commit an action like this. And also, we would like to ask you, if parents are not responsible for their children's mistakes, why is the law with us that the parents are responsible for their teenagers' mistakes? Thank you.
First of all, I would like to point that all your cases that you're talking about, there are exceptions. Now we're talking about teenagers, we're not talking about children. And when we talk about laws, we build up on rules. The rule for a parent to raise the child is to raise the child really well. And you are talking about the exception that the parent didn't raise the child well. And the second thing is that when was parenting a style? You pointed that there are three styles of parenting. Parenting was never a style. Parenting was that great feeling or that great relationship that makes us what we are over here. And second of all, I talked about peer pressure and the media because they are the main influences that the teenagers have right now. I know the topic is not about them, but they are the things that made the teenagers act what they are on right now. And that's it. Yeah, sorry. And about the statistic you held, but on whom did you hold that statistic? On what age group exactly did you hold that statistic? Thank you.
Most of the respondents were aged 13 to 16, and most of the respondents were in the girls section, as we have previously mentioned. And yes, there are three styles of parenting. Parenting is a great thing. There is no denial. However, there are different types of parenting. Some parents are too aggressive. They force their children to study. They force their children to be friends with who they want them to be. And some parents are very negligent. They do not care about their children. They deny whatever they want to say. And however, some are assertive. And this type of parenting style, which is sadly the least used, as I previously mentioned, this type of parenting style raises the best types of children. So there are three types of parenting style.
May I speak? Yeah. And once again, I want to stress out the point that you are talking about the exception. You're talking about the exception that the parents didn't raise their children well. Now we're talking about teenagers. Teenagers, the nature of teenagers is that teenagers are renegades. They want to impose all authority figures. They just don't want to listen. That's how it is. That's the human nature, and that's how we are born. And you talk about the exception that the parents didn't raise their children well. When we build on things, we build on the rule. And the rule is the parents raise the child well. And the topic of the debate is that are parents responsible for the teenagers' actions? So we built that parents raised the child well, and so he became a teenager. And that teenager made a mistake. Should that mistake be blamed on the parent? No, it shouldn't, because the parent raised the child well. And the teenager should be blamed because he was the one who made that mistake. And he has a mind to do. He has a mind of his own. Can you tell me, is it just a coincidence that in Islam we are responsible for our actions once we turn teenagers, once we hit puberty? Is it just a coincidence that we become responsible for what we do, not our parents?
First of all, we would just like to point out that what we're speaking of are not exceptions. Many parents believe they are doing a great job parenting. However, they are not. According to Mulana Musa Ahmad Olgar, author of Upbringing of Children, he said that in religion, all of parents are guardians and they are responsible for their subjects. The environment into which a child was born is crucial to the development of his character. Every child is born pure. It is the environment created by his parents that determines his behavior and future. The parent is like a mirror. The reflection it gives, the child adopts. If the reflection is good, the child is good. If the reflection is bad, the child is bad.
Once again, you are basing on exceptions. You are just basing on exceptions. The topic is that are teenagers responsible for their, are parents responsible for their teenagers' actions? And when we want to reach that point of teenage, the child has to be well raised. For the statistic you said about 90% of the people believe that parents are responsible for their teenagers' actions. Correct me if I'm wrong. 94%. How much? 84%. But 200 years ago, the majority of the people believed that the earth was flat. And this proves nothing. If the majority believed something, it doesn't mean that it is correct. Taking in consideration the age we are living today, the age that where most of the time we spend our time in school, not with our parents, because our parents are busy in work, and working moms are been increasing. And on average, on the statistic I held, an average student spends less than 2 hours with his parent. Taking all that in consideration, the media and peer pressure all have a big influence on the teenager. And about the responsibility, the parents as guardians on their teenagers, yes, they are guardians, and they are responsible to guide them what to do. But they're not responsible if they didn't listen. They're not responsible if they felt the rush to do something. They're not responsible if they imitated someone else. They're just responsible to guide them and tell them what is wrong and what is right. They were responsible if they did something wrong when they were children, but they are teenagers now. Their prefrontal lobe is pretty much developed, and they are capable of taking their own decisions. But they are rushed, and they are judged by their emotional brain and their subconscious mind.
To answer all of your claims, I would like to ask you one question. How do we grow an oak tree, for example? First of all, we put the seeds, and then we add water. So, if we add too much water, which is the aggressive parenting, the tree will not grow properly. If we add very little water, the tree will also not grow properly. However, if we add the correct amount of water, that tree will grow healthy and strong. And no matter how strong a storm will try to take that tree down, which is the peer pressure you're talking about, the chances that a tree will fall down are very low. Second of all, you've been saying, how can I prove to you that in Islam, teenagers are responsible for their actions? It's because parents have been parenting their children for 13 years before they reach the point where they're judged by their actions. So how can you say that parents are not responsible if they have been the ones taking care of their children for 13 years before they reach that point?
I'm not saying, I'm saying they are not responsible, but those 13 years, they built the base through which the teenager would have that base, so he would build on it. He now has the base, he now has that authentic being inside him, and at the age of 13 or once he hit puberty, he will have the choices to do. He would have the choices to sit with those friends, he would have the choices not to sit with those friends. And taking in consideration, once again, the age we are living in, the parents controlling everything their children interact with is really small. If you said that 40 years ago, I would agree with you, but now, no, it's not valid. Give a teenager a laptop and you will see wonders. We are living in an age where our friends are considered our parents. We are way farther than our parents than we have ever been. And that's because of the age we are living in. We are the victims of this age or this generation.
I'd just like to stress out the point. You said that about the plant, if you put the seeds, if you put more water, it will not grow properly. You have to put the right amount of water. But that doesn't mean that the parents are applying the water. In many cases in the US, that's being 2,733 cases, are parents who ignore their child after birth, and their close relatives as grandmas, uncles took care of them. Now that water can be given by their parents or close-blooded relatives. That doesn't have necessarily be parents that apply the water to the plant.
And even through childhood, if you don't want to avoid that thing, the exception thing, and even through childhood, remember, you do know the saying that it takes a village to raise a child? Yes.
First of all, I would like to point out that again, you are straying off of the topic and off of the limits of this debate. It's true, it takes a village to raise a child. However, does that deny the responsibility of parents? Of course not. And what you said actually serves to our point. You said that parents form the basis of a teenager's actions. So do you think that if a parent has taught his child to be friends with good people, to respect his parents, and to respect everyone, do you think that person would be friends with drinkers and smokers? I don't think so. You're denying the very existence of parenting itself and its importance. And if your friends are your parents, why don't they raise you? If you're claiming that peer pressure is more important than parental influence, why shouldn't they be your parents?
I'm not claiming that peer pressure is more important, but nowadays peer pressure has a stronger effect on teenagers, not on children. I want to stress out again that on teenagers. And the thing is that nowadays, like two months ago, there has been a bombing, an attack in Brussels. Have you ever heard of that? By some Muslim extremists. And people just didn't slow down, and they started accusing Islam as a religion. And I think you're doing the same thing. You are blaming parents for their teenagers' actions. It's the same thing as you are blaming a religion, a whole religion, just because of some practices of that religion twisted those things in their own ways. I think it is quite ignorant because those people didn't know nothing about Islam, and they're judging it, and they are judging them. And it's the same thing. You have no idea about how those parents sacrificed and how they devoted everything for their children, and now you are blaming them. I want to point something out, that all you're talking about is some hypothetical things and theories. Life is not like that. Life is enthalpy. Life is disorder. Life doesn't follow orders. We are just like gases. We don't like to follow orders. And the sole truth behind being a teenager is to be a renegade. We are renegades, and this is inevitable. We are renegades. Even if you've been raised for 13 years, your parents told you to do this and don't do that. And then you come to a point where you face all the other slices of the society. Wouldn't you feel that you should do this and you should do that? Don't you think that why my parents told me to do this and not do that? At the end of the day, you're just a child, and you're just a teenager, and you want to experience everything. Thank you.
Two things I would like to point. The difference between religion and parents and the stereotype you've been talking about is that religion has its fixed basis. There is a holy book that people could follow, so that they can follow the rules of Islam. However, parents do not use these strict rules of parenting when they parent. Most of these parents, as Richard Templer said, do not follow the correct rules of parenting, and thus their children turn out to be disrespectful and rude. Second of all, we are not gases, we are clay molds. When our parents bring us into this world, they can shape that clay mold into whatever they want it to be. Third of all, you're saying that we are renegades. If we are renegades, then why don't we go and kill ourselves? Should we act on these impulses, or should we act on the parenting that our parents have given us for these years?
Okay, now it's time for the closing statement. Start off with Tim Purple. You have 2 minutes.
In conclusion, it is fair to end this debate with a justified opinion that parents do cause teenage misbehavior and thus are the ones to be blamed. Now, there are those of you who believe that teenagers are responsible for their own actions. And I say to all of you who make these claims, you are correct. Parents definitely cannot control every single action of a teenager. They're not God. However, what they do is control the basis of a teenager's thoughts and behavior, and that basis is what shapes a teenager's conduct. So, for example, if perfect, assertive parents properly taught their daughter to be nice to other people, the majority of her actions will be of kindness and goodwill. However, if the parents of that same girl are very negligent and irresponsible, she would not learn right from wrong. She would most likely act on deeds of discourtesy, rudeness, and carelessness. To quickly cover our points, parents' parenting style influence teenagers. Although many parents, they're doing a great job while parenting, they are often wrong. What these parents do not know is that aggressiveness leads to aggressiveness. Arguing leads to arguing. Punishing without justification leads to more negativity and rebellion. Permissiveness leads to the dominance of a teenager, and negligence, the worst parenting style, leads to extreme rebellion and disrespect. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, as stated by Newton's third law, which is also found in the Rules of Parenting book we've been speaking about. Second of all, teenagers see their parents as role models. If a parent smoke, then teenagers are more likely to smoke themselves. If parents use domestic violence, their teenagers are also more likely to be abused or abuse their spouses. Teenagers who feel their parents strongly approve of sexual intercourse themselves are more likely to engage in such acts themselves. Finally, children did not ask to come here. Parents brought them here. Thus, it is the parents' job to take care of them. So to all of you parents who are failing to raise your teenagers and are blaming others for their misbehavior, I say to all of you, the government did not bring your child into this world. So don't expect the government to raise your child. Your teenager's friends did not bring him into this world. So don't expect them to raise your child. Your teenager's teachers did not bring him into this world. So don't expect them to raise your child. You brought your children into this world. You took responsibility to care for whatever you were conceived with, and you are the leaders of your children. And you have no right whatsoever to blame others for your teenager's misbehavior. Every child is born pure. It's the environment given to him by his parents that shapes his character. I end with my conclusion with a request to all parents out there who are blaming others for their teenage misbehavior. If you are not up to the responsibility for taking care of your teenagers, and if you're not up for the challenges, please do not add a person to our society. 7 billion people are enough, and we do not need another ill-mannered person. Thank you. I hope we made our point clear to every person.
تفضل.
Nothing, not science, not theology, not politics, and not even love. Nothing means without our brains. Everything we know and do, all the sense of human thought, all the feelings of human emotion, all the questions of human existence are all the product of our brains in our heads. Thought, emotion, existence. I've yearned to know what's all about. One could start with physics, philosophy. I start with the human brain. God endowed us this organ for a reason. And that reason, as you might have guessed it, is to think. Can you tell me what is the difference between us as human beings and as animals? It is the organ that we call the brain. We humans have the privilege of choice in our lives. And other than that, it wouldn't be fair for God to judge us at the end of our life. God gave us this organ. God gave us this organ to be independent and capable of taking decisions that will later face the consequences. As long as you and I have brains, we are not to blame others for our actions. We shouldn't blame our parents for our actions, namely. Since we should learn how to be responsible, and since we are easily affected by our peers, and since we can easily be deceived by the media, and last but not least, since we are the victims of this time. And at the end of the day, if we were to follow what you're saying, wouldn't it be just unfair for the child to be born with parents that didn't raise him well? He didn't. At the end of the day, he didn't choose that. The parents chose that. Isn't that unfair for him? If he has no choice, if from the beginning his parents know it's prejudged from the beginning if he will be good or bad, isn't that just unfair? And at the end of the day, you are responsible for you. Thank you.
Thank you. يلا. Excuse me. ماشي. The final results are 10 purple with 51.5 points and 10 orange with 44.5. مبروك.